Hello, everyone. This is Alfredo Abate, your current Chicago Oracle Users Group President. Welcome to today's webinar. As an attendee, you'll be in listen-only mode. You can ask questions in the chat window, which we will monitor. All questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. And we'll also be streaming live on our YouTube channel, and the recording will be available there to view shortly after the presentation is finished. It's great to be here with you today virtually. For those that are new to the Chicago Oracle Users Group, we welcome you. Traditionally, our group meets between 4 to 6 times per year in various locations around the Chicagoland suburbs for presentations as well as hands-on workshops by Oracle experts, ACEs, and authors. With the restrictions in place due to COVID, we decided to go virtual, as everybody else has, to continue to deliver awesome technical content to our members. Today is our 19th webinar in a series of 20 that we'll be holding until November 18th. So we're down to just today and next week for presentations. Really can't believe how quickly 20 weeks have gone by. You can visit our website to register for next week's presentation and also view our past ones, including downloading the presentations by our speakers. And our website should be in front of you right now, which is coug.us. Our user group runs completely unfunded. Our members don't pay any dues, and our meetings have always been free. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, OAPSnet Partners, for providing the Zoom webinar platform. They are an Oracle Gold partner and systems integrator with specialties in areas of financial business solutions based on Oracle applications both on-premises and in the cloud. They provide services in the areas of AP automation, Apex development, database upgrades, and administration. Next week, don't miss our webinar with Oracle PL SQL legend, Stephen Feuerstein, on newer features of Oracle PL SQL. You can register for that on our website right now. Today, we're very pleased and excited to have Oracle ACE Director and probably COUG's biggest champion, Jim Czuprynski, on Politics Ain't Beanbag, using Apex, ML, and GeoCoding in a modern election campaign. Hi, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome. I'm going to give you the screen to share, and then it's all yours.
And I'm going to take that screen and get started here. Good morning, everyone. We're going to have an interesting day today. First, let me get my presentation up here. There we go. It's an interesting topic, title, Politics Ain't Beanbag, and so forth. And I gave this presentation, I think, like 3 times in the past 4 weeks in Europe and Australia, and I think even in Spain. So I had to explain more about what Beanbag was all about. So I'll do that in just a second. But first off, welcome to all of you today, especially on Veterans Day. And if you're a veteran, again, I know it's trite to say thank you for your service, but you are the true 1%ers in the United States today. And I appreciate everything you've done for our country. A little more about me. If you've heard me speak before, you know I've got quite a bit of DBA experience and been around a block a few times, if you will. But lately, I've been spending more and more time really diving into the application side, if you will, of all things database, right? I actually started out as an applications developer, but I've been finding that that's where a lot of our industry is going, right? We're becoming less and less core DBAs, if you will, and becoming more polyglot, if you will. By the way, here's my contact information. I'm always looking for new content for Techceleration, ODTUG's database community portal. Alfredo, I know, has contributed some articles, and we're always looking for new authors. So if you have something interesting that you'd like to share with us, send it over. Article, not presentation. Okay, we're looking for plain business English articles, you know, with code examples or whatever you want to share with us for whatever you're doing. So our title today, for you folks that are born and bred here in this great city of Chicago, you already know what Beanbag is. Try explaining that to somebody in Spain. By the way, I don't know if any went to the Spain Oracle Users Group conference. It was an avatar-based event, and that means you had your own avatar, and you could, you know, put on whatever clothes you wanted or whatever. My interesting experience with the Spanish Oracle Users Group was right in the middle of my presentation. Somebody pinged me, and I thought that that meant I needed to answer their query. And apparently I ran off the stage virtually. So it's an interesting experience. Just about as the point I was going to explain what Beanbag was. So this is actually my nephew, David, my grandnephew, David, playing Beanbag. Basically, you know, you take this thing, it's filled with beans or corn or whatever, it's a little bag, and you throw it towards a hole, right? Why is that important? What is that all about? Well, it has a unique history in our city because this guy, Finley Peter Dunn, was a columnist in the early 1900s for the Chicago Tribune, and he came up with this political statement in an Irish accent, very appropriate, and he said, politics ain't beanbag. And what did he mean by that? Let me tell you. Politics, and if you haven't been paying attention lately, is a down and dirty, nasty business. And it requires immense organizational skills, a really thick skin, and the ability to really understand your populace, right? And it was also, by the way, a favorite phrase of Harold Washington, who was really a quintessential Chicago politician. I remember the day he won the nomination for the Democratic Party to become mayor, and how everybody suddenly in Chicago, many people who had never voted Republican in their life suddenly became Republican. It was quite interesting back in the 80s, right? But one of the things you may not know about your flag of your city is it actually, the 4 stars represent something. And the first star, the founding of Fort Dearborn; the second, the Great Fire in 1871; the third, the Columbian Exposition; and the fourth, the Chicago World's Fair. The interesting part is that first star, the Fort Dearborn founding, because in reality, this guy, Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, was the first resident of Chicago, the first formal resident of Chicago, also an African. And I found it quite interesting that it took almost 150 years for an African American to be elected to our city. You know why? Because politics ain't beanbag, my friend. It's a tough business. And I had the opportunity, by the way, to work on an election campaign here for the Illinois 6th District. As habit happened, I turned out to be a Democratic campaign that I was working on, but it could have just as well been the Republican campaign if things hadn't changed a little bit. And I'm going to tell you more about that as we look at how we were able to use tools in Apex to help out the campaign. Did they accept all my help? No, not all the time, but I was able to come up with some excellent use cases for 2020 and 2022, because let me tell you something else. Campaigns never end. Campaigns never truly end, especially for a congressman. But here's the big picture. Apex right now is one of the key ways that you can easily bring applications into an Oracle autonomous database. You may or may not be aware of this, but if you haven't played with the always free layer and you build an ATP or ADW instance, you essentially get a free Apex workspace. And you can immediately start drawing data in, even if it's from a simple spreadsheet, right? And, you know, if you will, I like to think of Apex as the spreadsheet killer, you know, the application that lives inside a spreadsheet that no one has anything documented. And for all we know, the data is not even accurate. Here's another great thing. What about external sources that you don't have access to? Things like microservices, right? Or even tables or flat files in another environment. Did you know Oracle's got a REST API for that? You can actually access those services directly through a REST API call. I'm going to show you a couple examples of that coming up for some geolocation stuff I've done. And that means you take the code to data, not the other way around. And finally, if you haven't figured this out by now, if you're a core Oracle DBA or an apps DBA or a developer, we are headed towards an amazing future. We are headed towards a digitally driven or a data-driven future. And you look at anything that's happening today, any decision that's being made intelligently, everything from COVID all the way down to election strategy, it's being driven by digital data. by digital information. And one of the things that's great about this is, that, if you're a core Oracle DBA and you're concerned about where your future is, well, your future is going to be inside data science, right? And it's interesting that we're in an excellent position to do this because, much like General McAuliffe at Bastogne, my father-in-law has passed on many years, actually fought at Bastogne and talked about being part of the battle when the German army had surrounded the Americans and basically said, if you'd like to surrender, please surrender. This guy, General McAuliffe, said nuts because he didn't swear. I think he would have said something else if it had been General Patton or something like that. I think I know which word he would have used. And he also told his troops, we're completely surrounded. We now have the enemy exactly where we want them. We can attack in any direction. And my friends, that's where you are too, with the idea of data science and becoming digitally driven, the focus of where we're going in this next decade. And it's absolutely happening. I mean, COVID is an excellent example of that, providing that we listen to the scientists that are interpreting the data. You can become a roustabout, a data roustabout. You can be the person to help that digitally driven transition, right? So that's a great opportunity for you. And the coolest thing about this is something that Oracle calls the Converged database. I actually attended a recent seminar on this from the product management point of view. And it was interesting because someone actually asked, and this was like an Oracle ACE director who says, well, how do I buy Converged database? And the answer is you can't, because the database is already there. The whole idea here is we've got to present stuff to business leaders and analysts, data scientists, developers, anybody that's interested, end users, right? And we can do that digitally driven through business analytics like Oracle Analytics Cloud, Oracle Machine Learning, that's built into every single Oracle autonomous database, whether it's an ADW or ATP instance, and Apex. I'm going to share some really cool stuff with you on that today in terms of gathering the data, digitally enhancing it, if you will, with machine learning, and then presenting it. On the other side of the equation, on the left-hand side here, where can we get data from? Where would you like to get it from? And by the way, if it's external, leave it where it's at, for gosh sakes. Take the code to the data. And I'll show you a couple examples of that coming up. But for now, let's get into the election. As I mentioned, I had been part of a congressional campaign in 2018 for the Illinois 6th District. Extremely diverse district. More on that coming up in a second. But I realized right off the bat, and I did a presentation on this in a bit of an article series last year and this year about this, that we literally sketched out what we would need on a napkin in a Panera in Glen Ellen, right? And I said, well, you're going to need to keep your organization managed. You're going to need to keep tracking how many people are being talked to. Remember when we could actually knock on doors and talk to people to their face and not stand 6 feet away with a mask on? You're going to need to understand your organization staff hierarchy. Humans are like this, right? We got to know who reports to us and who we report to, right? And finally, are we covering the geographic areas that we need to cover? So I actually built a very small application using Apex. And this is an example of, by the way, these are fake data. Okay, this is generated data. I don't have any information here that's public that I want to share with you here. But I built a parent-child relationship between two tables, a table containing voter information and the individual canvassing history. I know if you've been a voter in Illinois, you're lucky because you weren't in Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania battleground states. People are getting hammered with, would you like to contribute? Have you voted yet? If you voted already, did you support down ballot stuff? All this type of canvassing is very crucial to campaigns. And I actually spent some time supporting especially Wisconsin election efforts for the Democratic Party in Wisconsin. again, you could be also work for the Republicans. It doesn't matter. The point is that these efforts need to be tracked, right? And see where they were effective. And it changed over the week before the election, right? So tracking this is very critical. Now, the cool thing is I was able to build these two screens in about a weekend. Probably spent 4 hours reading the documentation and 1 hour actually coding, right? I was able to do this with about 5 mouse clicks. I had the tables built already. I didn't have the Apex application. I was able to build it in a very, very brief period of time. Let me share another thing. I may have not shared this with you before. Let me go pop into my actual applications here, which I've got right here. And let me share with you, not that, but some of the aspect of campaigning here. So if I go over here and I show you my campaign organization, I've got basically 3 levels. At the lowest level, we've got volunteers, but I also have major organizers. And again, these are non-actual people. These are simulated people, right? But for this person, Charles Barnes, who's a committee lead, he has several canvassing organizers reporting to him. And we can see who all these folks are. But so what? Well, here's what. If I actually click into Mr. Barnes's record, I can get some nice feedback as to how voters have been canvassed throughout the area of the 6th district that Charles Barnes would have been responsible for. If we just do a quick back here, I want to share this with you too, right? If I want to take a look at Ms. Priscilla Champion here, I see something a little different. I'm still tracking how many voters have been canvassed by her individual volunteers, but also the frequency and timing of when those volunteers were canvassed. These types of dashboards are absolutely crucial for elections. You know what else? They're crucial for just about any type of organization that you have in the real world today, right? You have to know through a dashboard how people are performing, whether people are searching for voters or whether people are searching for new customers, right? Imagine anything like this. The key point is I was able to build these. The tree view was the trickiest part. I was able to build this in about a weekend. And then things got interesting because while I was building all this stuff and hoping that my friends in the campaign would actually use some of it, my wife came to me and said, you know what? I'm going to go out into the field and canvass. Remember, this is 2018. That means going and knock on doors. And I said, that's really great. How did it go? And she goes, well, not so good. This is about 2 weeks before the 2018 campaign completed. And I said, what's the problem? My wife said, well, I had to hold my umbrella in one hand. I held a clipboard in my other hand. And I'm like, clipboard, why didn't you have an app? She goes, they don't have one. I'm like, oh, no, nobody, nope. Let's get you one. Now, again, with 2 weeks to go on the campaign, there wasn't exactly a high adoption rate, and I didn't really expect it, but it's a great use case, right? To use Apex app. And so what I did was actually built a little application to which allows you to, again, simulated data, choose whoever you are. I will randomly assign you 5 people to canvas, whether that's telephone or email or actually knock on a door. And then finally, you're allowed to record things. Let me share that with you. And here's one of the cool things. You notice that this display is kind of wide, isn't it? Right, sure it is. Let me share with you the actual application itself, because this is the thing that's so cool. Notice I'm running in console mode so that I can actually share with you how the app runs if it were on, in this case, a Pixel. And notice that I clicked there, and for volunteer Adams, I've got a list of all the different voters that I can talk to. And if I want to go ahead over here and change the date, the time, not the time, but the enthusiasm rating, whether or not they really liked my candidate, whether they were marginally excited about volunteering, they definitely don't want to contribute, they would like to have you follow up, and it's okay for them to contact them and say, loves our guy, right? Something like this. And then all I have to do is come down here I'm sorry, or up here. I guess I should put the bottom in both places and record that activity. And now I've got a rating assigned. And by the way, I now get a new person added to the list. This is not a trivial application, but it sure as heck isn't super hard to build. I built this in about probably a couple of days. I have to admit it, right? I had to gather some nice examples and I pulled it together. But the point is, what I love about Apex is you can run this app on just about any device without having to write any additional code. And now we roll into 2020. Now the world's changed. Now, I first got involved in the 2020 campaign for Illinois 6th District in November of 2019, trying to get ahead of the curve. And some of the things that we wanted to deal with that we had learned, by the way, we only had 4 months in 2018 to really get boots on the ground. And, you may have heard this joke about Democrats that, if a Democratic committee decided to form a firing squad, they would line up in a circle. Let me tell you, because it's such a big tent and there's so many different ideologies, unlike typically Republican campaigns, which are generally pretty tightly focused on 2 or 3 issues, you have such a huge pastiche of folks. Some folks are more excited about reproductive rights. Some people are, that's their top thing. You got other people who, the heck with all that. It should have been Bernie, right? That should have been our campaign or candidate. You got other people who are focused on climate change or science or education or whatever, right? So you've got tons of voters, volunteers. How do you keep everybody organized? The key point is to keep them engaged all the time. But we also wanted to take a look at, hey, are any voters that may have flipped in 2018? What do I mean by flipped? There's actually a technical term for that. It's, but I like using the term flipped, right? Someone that may have voted for the other party consistently and now is voting for the other party, right? It's actually a term called voter elasticity. So I'd like to take a look at that too. And then of course, hey, we're reaching out to voters. And let me tell you, as of March 14th, 2020, the last time my wife and I have been out to dinner together for her birthday, everything pretty much changed because of COVID-19. So now we knew we were going to have to be doing things like texting or telephoning or emailing people. And so as that new revelation came through, I'm thinking here, my gosh, since 2020, what's changed? Well, Apex is still Apex. Okay, we got a future version, but I've got the always free layer, right? And I've got an autonomous database. I've got up to about 20 gigabytes worth of space. That's a ton of space for just about any congressional campaign. For short of a national campaign, something like, say, Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, more than enough space, right? I've got a simple data model. Even today, I only have about 8 tables inside my data model, and they don't have a heck of a lot of data. Machine learning is built in, right? Analytics is built in. And by the way, you may not have known this, but geolocation features, geospatial features, right? Spatial and Graph are free inside Oracle 19C for sure since January of this year. And just because they're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, as the saying goes, right? Security is a must. I got to make sure that data that's kept inside my database is secure, encrypted, at rest, as well as transmitted. So what are some of the requirements that I came up with? Well, a couple of things that happened during the campaign, right? We had counseled folks, please stop using Google Sheets. Okay, please stop using Excel spreadsheets, right? And the first assignment I got was, hey, merchandise and signs, right? When I first worked with the campaign, one of the things in 2018 was we need a way to get campaign signs out to people, some larger, some smaller, and coming up with a routing for that. For starters, we'll just take, where are they? Where is everything, right? So my advice was not heeded. They decided to do all their management of that inside Excel spreadsheets, but they wanted to have some kind of way for them to map and route things, okay? they put a lot of restrictions on themselves by going with a Google Maps API. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, because you may or may not know this, but you can plug Google Maps or plug just about anything in Google Maps. But if you start going beyond certain ranges, right, it's going to cost you, and it could cost you quite a bit. So again, just be aware of that. One of the requirements they gave me though was, hey, we've taken our area, our region, and split it up into essentially 8 excuse me for just a minute. There we go. Sub territories, sub regions. And we're going to send you an Excel spreadsheet. I'm like, well, that's great. Oh, by the way we did it is, by the way, again, this is not real data, just in case you're curious. These are requests for different types of merch, right? As well as things like campaign signs. What they did is they said, we're going to put a different region in tabs in the Excel spreadsheet. And no problem. Extremely simple to do this, right? Actually, you can build this from the data mapping showcase sample application that's built into Apex. You can just download that and experiment with it. I don't want to say I took this verbatim, but it's pretty close to what's actually there. And I believe this actually will work for Google Sheets with multiple tabs in them as well, right? So basically, I was able to go ahead and get this information there. But that's only part of it, right? We've got people's addresses, we've got their names, we know what they want. Now we got to talk about, how am I going to go ahead and get information about where that really is on a map? Because if I need to do routing and send a volunteer out to deliver a sign or a bumper sticker or a t-shirt, remember, we're in the middle of COVID here, right? I can only send certain people. I have to limit their contact. Well, to be able to do that, I've got to figure out where everyone is, the volunteer as well as the person that's made that request. So one of the things I started experimenting with were web source modules. Because again, you can do geolocation through the Google Maps API, but if you go over a certain number per day, they have the right to charge you for that. So I found a couple of really great examples. Here's one. This is these using MapQuest. MapQuest has a single address capability, right? So if I need 500, I can just call that single address 500 times, not horribly efficient. But what I built was a web source module. And then by typing in essentially that base URL and using the address path, right, or the URL path prefix, I could pass in things like an address. And by the way, you need to have an API key. And you can see here, I passed in my location, which happens to be my address. Well, how do I process all this? Well, you have to write a little bit of code underneath the covers, right? But use Apex exec. And you have to know a little bit about the different parameters that you need to pass in and what you're going to get back out. But once you've got that set up, right, you use the Apex exec open web source query call to call that web source module and to get data back. So in this case, I was returning latitude, longitude, the name of the location, and also, how do you like this? How good is that information and which side of the street is it at? And I think if I remember correctly, right side is always right side as pointing north. I wonder how that works in the Southern Hemisphere. Anyway, it's an interesting idea, right? Then all I have to do is loop through those particular return values. In this case, it's really only going to be 1, but I still have to loop through it to see whatever those values might be. And then I get back some information. This is free geocoding, folks. It costs me nothing to do, and there's no limit on it with MapQuest, doing it one at a time. By the way, a couple interesting points here. There is nothing at 359 Pebble Beach Lane, Bartlett, Illinois, because I live down the street from it. There's no 359. What's interesting is that MapQuest still returns something meaningful. I happen to live on the left-hand side of the street. I have an even numbered address. So MapQuest was able to return something to me with a quality code. The L means not that perfect, but I could still get very good information back from it, right? If it was perfect, by the way, it would be P1 AAA. That's what it would basically be, right? So you can get some pretty good stuff here, but what if you need to get a boatload, right? Maybe you're doing 40,000 addresses. Well, you can build a web source module. In many cases, however, the web source modules for batch requests need JSON, a JSON document, a well-formatted JSON document in a specific format. Guess what you can do? You can build that in a CLOB. And I essentially used Apex JSON to build that information by writing the information into a CLOB and then submitting it to yet another type of geocoding portal called GeoCode.io. There it is, GeoCodio, right? Passing in my API key with a post method and passing in the sent CLOB contents. And all that has in it is a bunch of properly formatted addresses and identifiers. What do I get back? Another JSON document. And again, I'm not going to show you all that here. I wrote a series for Texeleration. I'll have the links to it a little bit later. But I was able to take the result, which again was a JSON document. And for every single person that needed in latitude and longitude, I dropped it into their voter record or volunteer record, wherever I needed it to. And that closed the loop. And now I'm ready to do some mapping. So let's take a look at some of the mapping capabilities that are built into Apex. Well, first off, there are some that you can use from Oracle, and I'll touch on that in just a minute. But Jeffrey Kemp, a fellow Oracle ace in the ace community, built an excellent map API, right? Google Maps API. Now, be aware, again, you've got to be careful when you use some of these things because, again, if you to use the Google Maps API, you have to have an API key. And they do track on developergoogle.com how many requests you're making for certain things. Here, I was just going to use this to display. So what I did is I had a little table that had merchandise requests, and I drove data out of that and was able to, by the way, pick some really nice features here in terms of things like where I want the initial map center. By the way, that's in latitude, longitude. Some of these interfaces, by the way, for mapping reverse that longitude, latitude. Don't know why, that's just what they do. So 42.5 minus 87.5 puts me just about right smack dab in the middle of our district. So that's the things I could set up. And by the way, you can change these settings many different ways if you want to, even via JavaScript. But essentially, I open an iframe, and here we go. Here is my actual output from my mapping plugin. This is actually one version back. I'll share with you a few things here in a minute because I've got another really cool example. I think this is still the current link to Jeffrey Kemp's plugins, but if not, ping me via email and I'll get back to you, right, to show you that. But the stuff I'm going to show you just in a minute here is actually using the latest version. So I think we're on version 4 now of this Maps plugin. Extremely easy to plug in, takes a matter of minutes, and you're off and ready to go, right? So let's take a look at some other things, because just like anything else, things change, right? One of the things that happened in this election, unless you've been hiding under a rock for the past few weeks and months, is that obviously vote by mail was going to be a major factor in this election. Not so much just because of COVID, but because so many people were energized and wanted to make sure that they could get their ballots counted. One of the things that's neat about vote by mail, and I voted by mail, by the way, in Illinois, is that, again, I can vote in the comfort of my home. I can look through the ballot very carefully. A lot of folks don't vote on any of that judicial retention stuff. I'm different on that. I think the judges are very important, right? I don't just vote for the national offices. My wife is an ardent researcher of all this before we vote. So I can sit at my desk at home, take my Sharpie out, record what I want to record, mail it in, or take it to a Dropbox. So with about 3 weeks to go in the campaign contacts me and says, hey, we need some help, because we span 5 different counties. And if you have a vote by mail ballot and you don't want to mail it in, and again, as certain times proceeded, right, there were many voters. I was also an election judge on November 3rd. Great way to spend my birthday. And many people came in with their vote by mail ballot. Or they said, well, I got one, but I left it at home. Or they said, I requested one and I never got one. And we had to do special processing for those folks, right? One of the things we were encouraging people via text and everything else is get to a vote by mail drop box. And here's the rub, at least two different challenges. Number one, some of the towns in our district span 3 counties. In fact, Bartlett, where I live, spans 3 counties, all right? You must take your ballot to the same county in which you reside. So you can't, if you live in Bartlett DuPage, you can't go to Bartlett Kane's Dropbox. You have to put it there. And some of these were available at wildly different times, okay? McHenry County, which is much more rural, essentially had 1 Dropbox open, 1 for the entire county on election day, okay? So you have to know all these things and make sure that these were open at the appropriate times. And some opened on September 24th, some opened on October 7th, some on October 17th. It depends on which county. This was not a trivial case. So not an Apex solution, but this was the original solution that we came up with. We essentially built via Node.js and some React code and posted it up as public pages on GitLab, a ballot Dropbox finder. Okay, and so we pulled this together. Hey, I knew nothing about Node.js, React, or GitLab. I know GitHub pretty well. I get Git. It's not a big deal. But I had to basically learn this stuff, right? Underneath the covers, what we had to do to drive this was a JSON document. Hey, remember that JSON thing we just had a couple minutes ago? Yeah, JSON is the new XML, folks, is what it comes down to, right? And I was able to build this. It took about a day or two to really get an understanding of where everything was and how to transform data and things like that. But note that, by the way, this was, I believe, I took the screenshot a couple of days before the election, right? Here's your Dropbox availability based on your county, in this case, Cook County, Bartlett, right? If I had put in DuPage County, Bartlett, I would have got a totally different location. And there was a link here. Notice you can see it there for Google Maps directions. But that tells me only where it's closest to inside my county and my town. The truth is I could go to several different drop boxes in Cook County, right? It didn't have to be the closest one to my town. So I built something. I built a list of all the vote by mail drop boxes in, a real database. That's, if you can see that there in the all black text. Inside there, I was able to pull off latitude, longitude, a label for which that Dropbox might have been, where it actually existed, and even a waypoint. In this case, a waypoint blue for the icon. And this is the guts of what we needed to know for each voter, because I could actually, from the voter, if you notice that dark brown or dark red code at the very bottom, because I'm able to use Oracle's SDO geometry features, I could say, hey, show me the 5 closest drop boxes within a specific radius. And I think I defaulted it to a distance of 5 miles, if I remember. So this little query let me build a list of those within a particular range. And here's what it looks like. In fact, this is the display. Let me show it to you live because it's kind of fun. So here I am back in my app. I'm going to go over here to voters. Come on, baby, wake up. And I'm going to go to my locate by vote by mail Dropbox. And I defaulted some values in here. It's not a big deal, right? I could say just as well 31 or something. And the way this works is any string, any address that has 31 inside its street address, anything that has BAR for my Cook County and other friends of this area, Bartlett, Barrington, Lake Barrington, Lombard, right? I could type that in. And finally, any part of the zip code, in this case 60, right? Everything pretty much starts with 60, and a 5-mile radius. And if I click on search, what do I get back? I get nothing. Okay, so there's nobody there. Let's change that. There we go. Let's search again. Okay, and now, what did I do here? That's strange. That should work just fine. Oh, I put a space in, dummy. Let's try that again. There we go. We got some stuff. So we got some results here. And then all I have to do is click on any one of these. And this is, again, the power of that Google Maps plugin, right, folks? By the way, the other code that I didn't show you was simply another little bit of code that says, hey, also find the latitude and longitude of this particular voter 73, yada, yada, yada. No personal information here. And around the corner here, within a 5-mile radius, here are all the different drop boxes. And if I go to COUG, here's the voter again. Here's the 4 closest. And if I go to, well, we've done DuPage. Let's see, do we have another one? Here's one in Lake County, right? Here are the 8 drop boxes within a close radius. This took a little bit of coding. Probably the trickiest part was writing some JavaScript to detect the change here as I went through each different row. But that's pretty cool. I mean, that's really nice that someone could see this. So anyway, that took a little bit of extra work, but what a great use case. That's what I love about elections, are the use cases, right? So this was a cool thing. In fact, I just finished this off just before the election ended. So unfortunately, the campaign did not have a chance to use it, but we'll certainly incorporate this technology the next time around. By the way, you don't like Google Maps? You don't want to pay for geolocation? By the way, Oracle's got an entire suite of geolocation services. And just to share it with you, this is the actual coming from the Google, I'm sorry, scratch that, the Oracle Cloud Marketplace. By the way, if you grab in Apex the geolocation showcase, you can essentially duplicate what I've showed you here. I grabbed some of that. I'm going to have to do this a little differently, but let me share that with you. Oh, don't tell me I have to log in again. Come on. Okay, well, how are we on time? We're running short on time. It's worth it. It's worth it, because I want to share with you how easy it was, to adopt it. I have a long password for my Keeper login, but it's a funny one. And I will not share it with you because it's too funny. Let me just log into my workspace real quickly here. Okay, good. We're signing in. Come on, children, wake up. And I'm going to go to my VEVO app just real quickly here. And I'm going to run one that I'm still tweaking a little bit, but this is an excellent Oracle geolocation example. And I'm just working through some of the details on this, but I'm going to run this part of the app just right now. It'll just bring up this page. Notice it's not active just yet, but I'm going to go ahead and type in a voter ID and note, there they are. Look at that. Well, wait a minute, that's not Google Maps. I know. This is Oracle's geolocation tool, Oracle HTML5 Maps plugin. And there's actually behind this, by the way, several other geolocation utilities that you can use. You don't like this one, you can actually go with, I think this is the standard MapQuest the MapQuest interface, I think they call it, but you can also do a satellite view. I'm just scratching the scratch on the surface here. You can also use the Oracle geospatial tools to do, as I mentioned, geolocation, in other words, getting latitudes and longitudes. And you can also get routing and directions information from geospatial. Now, there are some limits in play, especially in terms of batch geolocation. So don't quote me. I think it's either 500 or 2,500 per request. But remember, you can always do single geolocation, address by address, and just do a loop basically inside a cursor to get that information. Anyway, I think we've beaten that to death. Let's move on to machine learning. Some of the things I mentioned, right, is that I was working on doing some machine learning techniques for voters that were flippable, that had the possibility that they might vote for a candidate based on prior, not election returns, not who they voted for. I have no idea. But we do know via primary declarations which party they declared as Democrat, Republican, Independent, right? Here's the cool thing. I did some work with Oracle Machine Learning and Oracle Analytics Cloud. By the way, you can see that in another presentation I did for the Chicago Oracle Users Group some time ago. But the cool thing is that you can do exactly the same thing with this inside of Apex. There are over 24 different machine learning algorithms that you can deploy. The one I'm sharing with you in a couple seconds here is based on decision tree. In other words, hey, because of some attributes of a voter, how likely, basically their voting history, how likely are they to switch party? And what I did was build a little desktop, not so much for finding the individual voters, but running a machine learning model and getting back data based on the accuracy of that model. So just to share that with you briefly, it's right over here. Whoops. If I come back over here and go under voters and go to my flippable voter scorecard, I get this nice little basically dashboard. And I just want to share this with you. I'm going to change my quantiles to 30 and I'm going to run this model. And I've tweaked this a little bit just for demonstration purposes. I'm running a machine learning model right now, folks. I'm running a decision tree model and I'm basically feeding in a random number of voters, okay, about somewhere between 60 to 69% as a training data set. And the remainder, whatever it is, if it's 65, 35%, to see how close we got to that. And one of the things I've incorporated, by the way, this comes from a particular table that you can generate that will tell you how many false and true positives and negatives you have. And so you can see here that, oh, okay, good. It looks like my model worked for about 3,200 people and worked pretty well in saying, no, these people aren't going to switch. And okay, I got about 6,000, 7,000 people that, based on my model, I should have seen switch party or not switch party. And for some reason, I got exactly the opposite result. And again, it's not who those people are. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is being able to measure and present inside some sort of dashboard exactly how well my model is working. Why can I do that? How can I possibly do that? And the answer is because Apex can take advantage of every single machine learning and or analytic feature that's built into an Oracle database, right? Whenever we run a machine learning model, we end up with tables or views as output. They're tables and views. That means I can hit them with Apex. Again, can I do this in R? Sure. Can I do this in other tools? Can I do this in OML for Pi? Yeah, sure I can. Why just not do it in Apex? I've got access to exactly what I need. Finally, I'm almost out of time. I just want to share this with you. This is a really cool thing. You may not have looked much at the jet charting. By the way, I shared this with a colleague and a potential client a couple of weeks ago for helping them possibly get interested in using the autonomous database, the autonomous data warehouse in concert with Apex. And he's like, oh, dude, jet charts, these are freaking awesome. And what I'm really showing you here is kind of looks like Robbie the Robot's arms there, doesn't it? But we're showing a distribution within gender and age of how likely someone is to be a flippable voter. And so by the way, notice I've got two other charts there I've broken out, not by gender, but now by age and reported ethnicity for males and females. And graphs are similar, but not exactly the same. And this is the kind of stuff that data scientists just go, oh, their eyes roll back in their heads and they go, that's fantastic. This is the kind of thing. Can I do this in R? And I'm like, you already are. R is built into Oracle, right? You can access, by the way, there is an Oracle R Studio, essentially, that you can access and do the things that you're already doing in R. But in a lot of cases, you can get the same graphic capability, display capability built into Apex with jet charts. It's quite impressive. And with that, that was a lot to throw at you in a few minutes. But here are some links, by the way, to some really cool stuff. The two guys up here, these are part of the OD-TUG series that I did, a 4-part series actually on machine learning algorithms. And the last 2 parts are really more on machine learning inside Apex, as well as the mapping and geolocation stuff I've shared with you. So that's all there. I've got a couple really neat things on geolocation, spatial and graph here. I did a couple of 2-minute tech tips if you just want to see what's capable, right? So if you got somebody knocking on a door going, we've got to go ahead and start doing this stuff and we need R and we need this and that, and just go look at those videos. Because you know what? You probably already have it inside your Oracle, your fully licensed Oracle, always free instance. Why go re-engineer the wheel? Let's just slap a different coat of paint on it. And with that, I'm going to be quiet and listen to your questions. I don't know if we have anything in the chat here.
I didn't see any questions, just one comment from Richmond. Apparently he has created an Apex app.
Okay.
That's using the card feature in Apex, which is also a voting app. So that'll be something to take a look at.
I sure will. I sure will. Thank you for that. I'll take a quick look. Thank you so much.
I'll share that with the rest of the
Yeah.
users on here so everybody else can see, because he only sent it to the panelists. So I'll put that on put that right there for everybody else to see.
Oh, thank you so much. I'd love to see that. How cool is that?
Yeah, I'm going to go take a look at that myself.
Okay. And I'm going to if there's no other questions, I guess we'll call it a day. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jim.
Sure.
As always.
No worries.
Next week is our last 20 and 20. I can't believe it. So next week we get to finish up with a bang. We have Oracle PL SQL legend Stephen Feuerstein on newer features of Oracle PL SQL. So I would probably recommend that if you're into PL SQL.
I mean, Stephen literally wrote the book. What? He's on edition 4 or 5. I mean, literally wrote the book. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. 4 or
right
5 or 11.
Yeah. So, and he's a great presenter too. Great presenter, a good friend especially to the Chicago community, even though he ran away to the southeastern seaboard. But, I'm going to tune into that one if I can, hopefully have no other things to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, well, that'll be our last one next Wednesday, same time at noon, Chicago Central Time. So we'll see you then. And if you can always check out this video in case you got on late on our YouTube channel for the Chicago Oracle Users Group. And we'll see you soon.
See you soon, folks.
Thank you.
Stay well, stay safe.